Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is you're watching this video. Welcome to my YouTube channel and to this video tutorial. There are already many tutorials for building fast track turnouts available online, including those produced by the tool manufacturers. Yet since I've been offering these turnouts for sale, I've often been contacted by people asking for advice without ever ordering any turnouts from me. This leads me to believe that there are many people out there who value my knowledge while not feeling completely comfortable with the official documentation. Sometimes it just takes tuition from more than one teacher before something makes sense. I've been hand building track and turnouts for decades without jigs, and also recently have constructed over 250 turnouts using the Fast Tracks tools. So I feel that I am more than qualified to present my version of a Fast Tracks turnout tutorial. It's a bit too long for one video, so I split it into 3 segments. Be sure to check out the other 2 parts, and also the video that I published earlier showing various random hints. Now, if after viewing my tutorials and the official documentation you feel that you are ready to tackle building your own turnouts, then that's fantastic. I will be honoured to have been the catalyst in introducing you to this fascinating aspect of the hobby. If on the other hand you still feel that hand building turnouts is still beyond your capabilities, or if you don't think it's something you're going to enjoy, or if you don't want to invest the time, or if the turnouts that you need are of many different configurations and the cost of the tools would be prohibitive, then I hope you will consider ordering the turnouts you need through my website. Well, anyway, that's enough introduction. Let's now head over to the workbench and build some turnouts. Well, today I'm going to be working on a batch of number 7 straight turnouts using code 70 rail, although the procedure is the same regardless of what size rail or turnout it is. I built most of them a few days ago, but it was too many for one batch. Here's the rail. I don't have enough in this pack, but I have plenty more elsewhere. I'm going to try to do this without my desk lamp on, because the light from it reflects badly off the jig, so hopefully I can see enough of what I'm doing. And you may notice that I have 3 marks on the front of the jig. Actually there's 5 here because I moved 2 of them when I redesigned it. First one is for the stock rail, and I know that with the number 7 I can get 2 stock rails and 1 V rail out of a yard length of track. This batch is for 6 turnouts, which means I need 12 of each kind of rail. Now, I always cut all the parts for a batch of turnouts before I start assembly. If I was doing them one at a time, it would just take too long and would not be commercially viable. And now I need 6 pairs of point enclosure rails. Now here I can get 3 of these and a V rail out of one length, but I'm going to cut the V rail next. For now I'm going to leave the point rail long. Now all these rail sections that I'm cutting are about ½ an inch or so longer than they need to be. That allows for errors at the ends, because sometimes I will file too much off and have to trim it a little bit. And I was wrong, I did have enough rail in that one pack. Okay. I always put the offcut back in backwards so the cut end is visible at the opening. Okay, that's all the pieces cut. Now I'm going to head over to my desktop belt sander and get them shaped. Well, I've now ground the ends of all my V and point rails. I didn't record that part of the process. I've shown that on a previous video, so I didn't want to repeat it myself here. And I need the light on, I can't really see enough. Hopefully you can still see even with the reflection. I have to clean it up with a small file, and also make sure there is no hook on the end, which sometimes happens with the smaller angles. In some cases where I overgrind it, the end needs to be cut off and cleaned up. I don't get too many of those. And now that I have them all cleaned up and sorted, it's time to turn the soldering iron on and turn them into these. And they have to come together so they just touch but don't force each other into a curve. And I like to get a decent sized fillet of solder on here. And hopefully it doesn't look like I'm flipping you off with my middle finger extended here. It's not the intention. And those are not ready yet. I still have to clean them up. But I can turn the soldering iron off. And let's turn the light back on because I'm going to be working on the dark table. And I just get the file. Start by cleaning up the top. Now hopefully the two rails will have been at the same height when you held them. The first one I tried was not, because I was working in darkness. I'm going to clean up both sides, make sure it's a nice straight point. This is one of the most critical areas of the turnout, so you've got to make sure that the V is perfect. The other critical area is of course the point blades. The rest of the turnout is no more critical than plain track. Hopefully you can see enough of what I'm doing here. Okay, so I have 5 good V's. This one is no good because of the step, probably because I was working in darkness. So what I do here is I just snip the end off, discard that, and I throw this into my offcuts bucket. If I was making shorter turnouts later, I would use them for the V rails on those, but I'm not. But that'll make check rails. So I'm just going to go and replace the missing V, and I'll be right back. With the V rails done, it's now time to turn my attention to the point enclosure rails. Once again, we've got to clean up the burrs with a small file. And what I'm going to do now is set them in the jig, put the point just on the throw bar, and I get a Sharpie and I make 2 marks. The first one where I have to make the kink, and the second one where I have to trim it. So I trim off the excess length, and then file a little nick in the lower rail flange with a triangular file, and then a small pair of pliers, kink it to the right angle, test fit it again, adjust that if it's not right, and put that aside. There are 4 different closure rails necessary for this batch of turnouts, and for the curved ones we need to put a curve in it. It doesn't have to be exact, it just has to be a smooth curve of approximately the right radius. The 2 dots, one for the kink and one for the cut. Now, I hope my viewers appreciate me doing this with the light off so they can see, because I can't. Now in some cases, if I file too much at the end, I'll have to trim the end, and then I'll have less to cut off at this end, which is the whole reason why I start by making them about ½ an inch longer than I need them. Here's one where I filed too much, the end is delaminating. A little bit of a split there doesn't matter because we'll fix that when we solder it on, but that one is just too much to deal with. So now there will be less offcut on this one. I now have my 4 sets of point and closure rails, 4 different ones, 3 of each kind, but they're not finished yet. I've got to chamfer the back end. The design of the jig does not allow for the wing rails to be bent away from the running rail like the check rails are, which is a bit unfortunate, because on the prototype you will almost invariably find that the 2 sides are done the same way. There is no reason for any railroad to do them differently. But as I say, the design of the jig does not allow these to be bent away, so I have to take these all back to the other bench and grind the corner off. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Well, with the point and closure rail shape, now it's time to turn my attention to the stock rails. I'm going to separate them into 2 even batches, making sure I know which ends all the good ends are. Now I used to lay them down on the jig and with a Sharpie mark the web where I needed to file, but I found a quicker way of doing that. Insert the rail into the stock aid, and then I use the point form tool as a gauge. Push it through the height of the gauge, and then that is the right amount of rail sticking out of the end. It's a lot quicker than marking it. I've shown you this bench hook before. And once you've made a few turnouts, you'll know exactly how much you have to cut out. And that's one done. I've got 5 more of these and 6 the other hand to go. Normally I do this on a flat surface, but I'm trying to do it in the camera so you can see what I'm doing. But I've now filed the notches on all the stock rails, and once again it's time to clean it up with a small file, just like all the other pieces. And sometimes the end will bend up slightly. I've found that the Code 70 rail does that a lot less than the Code 83. Maybe that's because we're filing off a lot less when we cut the notch out of it, and that one's just about perfect. That one's fine. So I'm just going to go through all of these and make sure everything is ready. But with all the major pieces done, now it's time to fashion the check rails. Now if you watch the how-to videos from Fast Tracks, they will recommend doing the check rails first. I disagree, because by the time you've got all the other pieces made, you'll have a pile of offcuts. And all these short pieces of rail can now be used to make the check rails. Those 3 I know are already too short for number 7s. Those are just about long enough for number 5 check rails, so those can go in there. And all the jigs have a groove the right length, so make sure we have a good end, because more than likely all your offcuts will have mangled ends on them. They've already been cut from the wrong side of the nippers. And I'm 3 short. And I still need 3 more out of this piece. And there's also these angled grooves on the corners of the jig to help in bending them. Now personally I think that the bend should be a little bit shorter, but I have to go with what the jig is designed for. You just bend them until they look like they're approximately perpendicular to the end of the jig. Well, that is all the rail components for these 6 turnouts already cut and shaped. What I'm still missing are the ties. Here is a set of copperhead ties, turnout length. These are good for the 16-footers or 2 of the very short ones. The crossover ties are long enough to do 2 mid-length ones, whereas the turnout ties you end up with a large offcut. Now the crossover ties are marginally wider. It's only a couple of thou, but I've noticed that some of the jigs, notably my number 8 jig, the pockets are too wide. All the others, they work properly. I don't use my high quality Xeron nippers for these. I use a pair that came with my soldering station. They're still pretty good rail nippers, but I'm concerned that this might blunten the Xerons prematurely. Now what I do is I cut them right at the very end so that I have the curved pieces showing. That way it's a lot easier to tell at a glance which way to insert it in the cut-off jig. And also I'm making sure that I'm not wasting anything. This is one part of the process that I just haven't found a quicker way of doing it yet. And the pieces that come off the side, I keep a few of those because they make great terminal strips. Although these I'm just throwing out because I already have a drawer full of them. And now this is more than enough copperhead ties to make this batch of 6 turnouts. And here is my homemade tie breaker jig. Fast Track sell them for each size of turnout, but I goofed up on one of mine and forgot to order it, so I just made my own universal one. And also, with the modification I made to the main jigs, I want more of the regular length ties, so I have plenty of extra pockets for those at the end. And I'm just going to put these in. Four of the short ones. And the next 4 I put long ones in, and these will be reused. And then the last few ties at the end are too long to be able to get 2 out of a crossover tie. So these 3 will get cut off and discarded, and those pieces will go in again for the second one. Now always wear eye protection when you cut these off, even though I aim them away from me. A couple of times I've had them bounce off the lamp and hit me on the glasses, so just be careful. And then obviously hold the pieces that you want. And then with a large file, clean them up. And now what I'm going to do is just clean up the ends and reinsert these pieces back into the jig. Now if I was doing 2 turnouts of the same hand, then I would leave these in the jig while I assemble one. But since I'm doing equal numbers of both hands, I take them out and put them straight in the jig now. Now on each turnout there are 2 ties with very awkward gaps, and these need to have their gaps filed before assembly. All the others are a lot easier to do afterwards. So I put dots where I need to make the gap, and because these gaps are not quite in the center, I also mark the inner end so I know which way around they go. That way I'm not going to get them backwards and end up with the gap in the wrong place. So let's pull these out. Find my triangular file again. And now we're all ready to start assembling that turnout. Well, that's all for this segment. be sure to check out the other two segments of this tutorial and also the hints video that I published earlier. If you now feel ready to tackle building your own turnouts, that's great. The people at Fast Track will appreciate your business. If not, then I hope you will consider having me build them for you instead. I hope you found this tutorial useful and hope to also see you again in many of my other videos. In the meantime, thanks for watching and bye for now.